Good afternoon, everyone. I'm thrilled to welcome you to today's Chamber of Commerce Lunch and Learn hosted by the Hooksett Chamber of Commerce in partnership with BlueLion. I'm Dawn Marie Perkins, and I have the privilege of being the president of this wonderful chamber community. Today, we have an incredibly valuable session lined up for you, focusing on a topic that's essential for every business, Human Resources 101. Our expert speaker, Tom O'Kane, brings a wealth of experience to the table. Tom is a human resources consultant with BlueLion, LLC, recently joining the team in August of 2023. With over 30 years of HR experience, predominantly in large multinational corporations, Tom is a true authority in his field. He specializes in several areas of HR, including employee relations, performance management, change management, policy development, compensation, and training facilitation. When he's not helping businesses excel at BlueLion, Tom enjoys spending quality time with family and friends, exploring new culinary experiences at restaurants, and embarking on day trips to the picturesque coastal towns of New England. Before we dive into Tom's insightful presentations, I'd like to take a moment to express our gratitude to each of you for joining us today, to the Hooksett Library for allowing us the use of their facilities, and to Tom for generously sharing his expertise. The session will be recorded and will be available for future viewing in our video library on our YouTube channel. For those who are not yet familiar with us, the Hooksett Chamber of Commerce is dedicated to supporting and fostering the growth of businesses in our vibrant community. Our mission is to help you connect, collaborate, and thrive. You can find out more about us and our events by visiting our website at www.hooksettchamber.org. Without further ado, let's get started with this enriching session on human resources. I'm confident that you'll find the insights shared today immensely valuable for your businesses. Thank you. Tom?
All right. Dawn, thank you for that introduction. I just want to make sure everyone can see my screen.
How do you share your screen again, Tom?
Okay. Let me do that. That might be helpful. Go back out. Yeah, pull it up again. Sorry for the delay, folks. I'll be with you in a second. Keeps disappearing on me. There it is. Yeah, as you can tell, HR is my expertise, not IT. All right, share. All right. Now I can't see it. So when I go to slideshow, it drops me into this. That's it, yeah.
It's taking a minute to think.
Yeah, of course.
There you go. You should be.
It's perfect. Okay, thank you so much, Jane. Sorry about that, everybody. It's nice to be here with you, and I want to thank Dawn for the introduction again. As Dawn said, I'm Tom O'Kane. I work for BlueLion. I have been with the company just for a couple of months. Dawn asked me a great question earlier, wondering, why I chose to leave corporate America to join BlueLion. I had a great opportunity to take a retirement package after working in HR for 34 years and decided the time was right to do something different. Got sort of tired of the big corporations and that environment and thought that my skills and interests could be applied to smaller businesses in New England. So with that said, I'm going to talk just a little bit about BlueLion and who we are. Already covered information about myself, and thank you, Dawn, again. And then we'll talk about the most common violations of the New Hampshire Department of Labor. There's 10 or 11 of them. Talk about those items. And then I'll talk a little bit about employee benefits that many types of companies offer, as well as recruiting and some best practices there. And then I'll talk just briefly about our services, not a hard sell at all. And if you have questions along the way, feel free to either shout them out or drop them in the chat, and Dawn can let me know how we're doing with that. So, all right, let me go to the next slide here. So this is HR 101. Of course, a disclaimer up front, right? So this presentation really is just aimed at providing general information. It shouldn't be construed as providing any individualized advice concerning particular circumstances. For that, you might want to consult legal counsel with those circumstances. The other piece is that this is just educational purposes only. Again, anything that I say or that's in the Q&A session should not be construed as legal advice, really just information. So who is BlueLion? So we're a human resources consulting company. We have 18 employees in total. The company was founded by Tony Runcie and Allison Miliato, and great women, really sharp. They know their stuff, and I was so happy to join them. The purpose really is to provide HR support of high quality to businesses, especially smaller businesses specializing in blue collar industries. Not all are blue collar, but we service anyone from a couple of employees to a few hundred employees. We are real people with real personality. I think everyone on the team is very genuine. Sort of what you see is what you get, which is what I really like about working with BlueLion. And we pledge 1% of our profit, our time, and services to our community. For example, I volunteered an hour of HR consulting advice to a martial arts studio. They were part of an entrepreneur club that we are involved with. So happy to do that. And I promise you, and this is true, we'll never provide what you don't want or need. Example, I was on the phone with a client a couple weeks ago, and after learning more about his company and his needs, I kind of said to him, look, you don't need that. You don't need that. You don't need that. Here's what I think I can do though. And you know, so example, I could have said, oh, sure. Yeah, you need it. No, we don't do that. It's not in anyone's best interest. So we're great to work with. Just a view of some of our HR consultants and admins. HR consultants generally work on projects related to policies, handbooks, creating training, delivering training, employee relations situations, certain hiring, certain terminations, compensation related things. Admins are also critical to what we do, and help with maybe some payroll support, benefits support, generating letters and such that businesses might need. So we're set up really well. The company is about 5 years old and doing very well, growing. Our team, we also have internal operations. We have an ops manager, marketing associate, executive administrator, someone who handles quality control for our work, such as if I develop a handbook, she'll go over it and make sure it has everything in there that's needed from a federal and state standpoint and such. And of course, we have a bookkeeper, right? You already heard about me. No need to go on there. Common HR concerns that not only our clients, but others have: payroll compliance. How long am I supposed to keep records for? Am I paying people appropriately? Having a safety plan. If you have 15 or more employees, do you have a safety summary form that's filed with the state of New Hampshire? Do you have a joint loss committee that meets every quarter and documents those meetings? Department of Labor claims, usually around things like compensation, but they could be other things as well. Selecting and implementing benefits for your employees, certainly very expensive, or it can be. and making sure that those benefits are truly what you need, what your employees need to both attract and retain the right people in your company. Compensation analysis. Everyone on this call knows how important compensation is and benefits, total rewards, especially in a very highly competitive market for good talent. Inflation being high, interest rates being high, and so forth, has put a lot of pressure on companies to make sure that they're paying appropriately, to make sure that they attract and retain the right talent. Incentive-based pay structures, recruiting and retaining staff, which we just talked about, it goes beyond pay and benefits. It also involves engagement and career opportunities and leadership, having appropriate leadership to help people and keep them engaged. And I mentioned handbooks and policies. We do these as well. Oftentimes, someone will already have a handbook and I'll just review it and make a number of suggestions. Sometimes businesses don't have a handbook at all, and we'll generate it from scratch after learning more about your business and what you need. So let's start with the top 10 New Hampshire Department of Labor violations. The first one, violation number 1, failure to pay. So all employers in New Hampshire are required to pay all wages due for hours worked. This is under the Federal Fair Labor Standards Act, and some of it is not necessarily limited to New Hampshire, and some is. Fringe benefits, things like gym memberships, discounts on things, right? So these things, if you offer them and the employee selects them, these things have to be paid as well. Any break time less than 20 minutes needs to be paid. Not meal periods, so not a lunch or a dinner, but a break of less than 20 minutes needs to be paid. Payment of wages when resigning or terminated. So in New Hampshire, every state has a different rule around this. So in New Hampshire, the rule is that if you have someone who resigned, so they resigned voluntarily, you would pay them by the next pay cycle. If the person gave you one pay period's notice or they were let go involuntarily, the pay is due within 72 hours of them leaving the company. So a lot of information on that one. You all may be aware of that one, but it's very important to get that final payment of wages correct. I'm just going to pause real quick to see if there are any questions in the chat or if anyone wants to shout out a question around this one.
Let's see. Okay, so Tyler has a question. He says, violation number 1 talked about payment of wages when terminated. Does that apply to unused vacation time?
All right, thanks for the question, Tyler. So this one's interesting. In some states, the answer is an absolute yes. When I looked at New Hampshire, it said if that's your common practice, then you have to do it. So if the vacation time is accrued and has not been used, I think the best practice is to pay it to make sure that you aren't violating potentially any laws. I don't think New Hampshire has a black and white, like it must be paid, but if it's in your policy book that you pay it, or if it's a precedent that you've paid it, it must be paid. I know it's a little gray. If it were my business, I would pay it out along with final wages just to make sure. Just going to check back in. Does that help you?
He said, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tyler, for the question. Any others?
Nothing else right now.
Okay. Thank you. Record keeping. So violation number 2, failure to keep accurate record of all hours worked. So the employer needs to maintain records of hours worked, and wages paid. And you could be subject to serious penalties for violating the law, and the Department of Labor will give the benefit of the doubt to the employee in the event of any dispute about hours worked or wages. The amount of time to hold on to these records of hours worked and wages paid would be 3 years after an employee leaves, or generally 3 years for a certain period of time. And I'm going to pause on this one too to see if anyone has any questions about this.
Nothing yet.
All right,
And that would just be no matter how many employees you have.
correct. That is absolutely correct. Dawn raises a good point. You know, there's all these different thresholds sometimes of how many employees might trigger a certain law, either a federal law or a New Hampshire law. But this one is absolutely violation 1 and 2, regardless of how many employees you have. So thank you for that. All right, 3 years. Violation number 3, illegal employment practices. So with this one, it's a couple of things. Employing workers who are under 18, who don't have the proper paperwork, or who are working more hours than they should be working as set by New Hampshire law, or who are working in a hazardous work environment. There are lots of stipulations around this. So I'll just read off a couple of quick things that I have here. So for minors who are under 16 years old, 8 hours of work on a non-school day, 48 hours per week are allowed during vacation if enrolled in school. During a school week, 3 hours of work are permitted per day and 23 per week if enrolled in school. For minors who are ages 16 and 17, a 48-hour work week with up to 6 days per week is permitted during vacation if enrolled in school. A 30-hour work week with work up to 6 days a week is permitted if enrolled in school. Night work restrictions. For minors under 16, work is prohibited during these hours, 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. For minors ages 16 and 17, New Hampshire has no restrictions on night work for these minors. So it's a lot of those types of things. If you don't have someone in HR or someone responsible for HR in your company, certainly you can always work with a company like BlueLion, but you can also look on the New Hampshire Department of Labor website to learn some of these rules. So that's the first violation under number 3 here. The other one is not adhering to meal break guidelines. For this one, anyone who works continuously for 5 hours is legally entitled to a non-paid break time of 30 minutes long. And if the break time is under 30 minutes long, or they work during this time, they are to be paid. So you don't have to pay for the break if they're taking the break and the break is 30 minutes, right? So again, it's the 5-hour threshold is for New Hampshire. I believe in Massachusetts, it's 6 hours. So it's always dependent on the state. But I'm going to pause here on this one because there's a lot of information, see if there are any questions.
I don't have anything in the chat, but I do have a couple of questions.
All right.
For those employees who are under the age of 18, how would a homeschooler fit into that? Because they're not necessarily enrolled in a public school or private school, but they're homeschooled, so they have more flexibility with their time. Do these restrictions apply to them as well?
So Dawn, I'm not 100% sure, but if I were a betting person, I would say they do.
Okay.
Because they're still in school, they're still a certain age.
Okay.
So I'd probably go by the age, not maybe necessarily the school, although I did quote some school stuff. If there is a situation like that, I would say, you could call the Department of Labor and describe the situation and get their input on that. But I would sort of stick to the age as the overall guideline.
And then you mentioned about the meal breaks, if, you give them a 30-minute break because they're working 5 hours. And they take it, you don't have to necessarily have to pay them if that's.
Correct.
Not the policy.
Correct.
The policy.
That's right, unpaid.
But if they don't take that break
Mhm.
and they work through it,
Yes,
businesses should not just say, well, our policy is not to pay for a meal break and we're just gonna automatically deduct it. They must pay for it if you work through it.
they must pay it, and that's a great question. That would certainly apply to the Fair Labor Standards Act. Now, in some cases, if a non-exempt person, that is someone who is eligible for overtime pay if they work 40 hours or more, if they work their lunch every day, that could trigger overtime. And a lot of companies, what they do to avoid that is to say that you need to provide us with advance notice if you are looking to work overtime or need to work overtime. Not taking lunch is not the way to do that. Now, you'd still have to pay them, even
Right.
though they did it without your consent necessarily. But the way to do it is to really coach employees around their time management, look at their workload. Is it equally distributed? Does the employee need a little help in some area to make them more efficient? But they would have to pay if someone works through their lunch period, yeah.
And
for
if they
non-exempt.
continue to not follow that policy, then they would need to have.
Yes,
Conversation.
exactly, Dawn. So there would have to be, I would just call it a seek to understand conversation, like, why does this keep happening? And then, remind them of policies, but also remind them that if it keeps happening, that they, could be subject to disciplinary action up to including termination of employment.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
HR is an interesting career. So, all right, any other?
No, that's it for
Okay,
now.
thank you for those. Violation number 4, undocumented workers. So obviously, unemployment of undocumented workers is prohibited. What does that really mean? So everyone that you have working for your company as an employee, regardless of your size, needs to have completed an I-9 form. The I-9 form, and there is a very recent one out there, you should always make sure that you are completing the most recent one. This form not only verifies somebody's identity, but it verifies their eligibility to work in the United States. With that form, they would supply the necessary documents to support these things, such as driver's license plus social security card, or a valid United States passport would satisfy that. I-9 forms need to be kept in a file outside of the employee's regular personnel file. If it were my business and I had 50 employees, I'd have 50 I-9 forms in a file in alphabetical order by last name. This is something that is very important. And the way the law works around this is that you need to have an I-9 that's completed with that documentation by the end of day 3 of the employee's start with your company. So if somebody forgets their documentation on the first day, okay, no big deal. But by the end of the 3rd day, they absolutely must produce it, or you should terminate their employment for such.
Okay.
I would recommend that you take a copy of their information that they presented to you and keep it with their form in that file, just in case you're ever audited. It's good to show that you did your due diligence and looked so.
Now, when they update the forms, or is there any kind of guidance as to how often an employee needs to fill it out or update it with a new form, or?
Another great question. Really, it should be a one and done type of thing, unless you go back and find out that, someone did not do it correctly or didn't provide, what you needed, then they should fill out a new form, but generally it should be one and done. And then, of course, just for new hires primarily, right? Yeah. All right, that one's a pretty easy one. Violation number 5, required pay. I'll also call this one show up pay. So there may be an occasion where an employer needs to have an employee come to work at the request of the employer, and perhaps it's on their day off. Who knows what it could be for? It could be for an investigation that the employer's doing, or something else that they might need the employee's collaboration on. And the rule is that if they show up, it doesn't matter if they're there for 5 minutes or 30 minutes, we need to pay them for 2 hours minimum pay at their regular rate of pay on that day. So otherwise, yeah, there could be fines and penalties and such. So again, so just making sure that you're paying 2 hours minimum, even though they only showed up for 30 minutes or whatever. Now, if they stay longer than 2 hours, you would pay more than that. You would pay the actual hours that they were there, but 2 hours is the minimum.
Okay. And does that 2 hours factor into any overtime pay, or is that separated? The compute overtime pay?
That's a great question. So I'm going to say it counts because it's actual work
Okay.
time. Like a vacation wouldn't count, or a bereavement day but this is actually considered work.
Okay.
Yeah. Or work purposes.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that help?
Yeah.
Great. I love your questions. Do you work in HR before?
I did some HR work at a previous job,
Okay,
so,
perfect.
and a lot of these things came up.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Violation number 6, workers' compensation insurance. So, whether you have 1 employee or 2 employees, whether they're family or friends or what have you, you need to have workers' compensation coverage for your employees and have them correctly classified with the type of work that they do. Usually what companies do is in your break room, kitchen, or whatever, you have a poster that outlines both New Hampshire and federal labor law. They can be combined on one poster, which is awesome. But then having a certificate of your workers' comp insurance is also something that you should do. Okay. And of course, making sure that any types of incidents are completed with an incident reporting form, no matter how big or little, and shared with your workers' comp insurance carrier within 24 hours of that incident occurring. Violation number 7, wage deduction, illegal deduction from wages. So obviously, we need to deduct things like, federal tax, Social Security, Medicare, unemployment, things like that. But it's illegal to deduct from wages anything that the employee does not consent to. So it could be that your organization is passionate about a certain charity, and you want everyone to contribute $10 paycheck, right? So we just can't do that unless we have notified people through email and the employee responds to the email as accepting it. Otherwise, yeah, we can't deduct those things. Everything else, taxes, insurance, premiums, and things like that are fine. And certainly contributions to charities are fine if the employee has acknowledged that they want to do this.
Okay.
Any questions out there?
No questions.
All right. Violation number 8, notification of rate change. So failure to provide written notice to employees of their wage rate, pay period, payday, and a description of fringe benefits, including any changes. So if someone is hired, obviously, or promoted, demoted, transferred, what have you, there should be a letter that the employee receives explaining what their new rate of pay is. at that time, what's the effective date? And the office of the employer must maintain a file in the files signed by the employee. Okay, so even if you decide to change your pay period or what day people are paid on or things like that, these are notifications that should be sent to people who should sign it and return it and kept in their file. All right, failure to pay minimum wage for all hours worked. So we all know that the minimum wage in New Hampshire is $7.25. Wow. Considering Massachusetts is, I think, 15 or so,
I think
maybe even
if they're
more.
not there, they're close.
Yeah, I think Vermont is in the 13s, maybe like 1368 or so. So not sure when this will change, if it'll change, but for now, it is $7.25 an hour.
And is that also the federal minimum wage?
I believe it is.
And I think that's probably how New Hampshire gets away with it.
Yeah,
But you have to do minimally you have to meet
Yeah.
the federal.
right. Correct. I believe it is. And, certainly this is an issue with some employers just not being able to attract and retain
Right.
people for any length of time. So they've got that revolving door, which is also very expensive when you think about the cost to attract and hire and onboard and train. So.
And I know I read that California recently just raised their minimum wage for restaurant workers to $20 an hour for fast food.
Mhm.
And they're working on, or they just finalized that over the next few years, minimum wage for healthcare workers will be $25 an hour.
Okay. Wow.
And I know that California is one of the strictest states when it comes to
Yes.
labor laws. So,
Absolutely.
they're very employee friendly.
They really are. I think, California, New Jersey, New York, Massachusetts tend to be very, very employee friendly.
Yeah.
You are absolutely right.
Tyler says Mass is 15 an hour
Okay,
and the federal is $7.25 an hour.
thank you, Tyler. All right, violation number 10, no safety plan and committee. So this is for businesses with 15 or more employees. They need to file the New Hampshire Department of Labor Safety Summary Form and have a written safety and health program for employees and meet quarterly to document joint loss management committee meeting. So 15 or more employees, you have a committee that meets quarterly, you file initially a labor safety summary form and such. So this is one I think that people kind of fall into a bit.
Okay.
Any questions about this one?
Well, I have a question.
Yes.
For a company who has many locations in many different states, is the
Okay.
15 employees based on each location and you have to file this in each state that requires it, or is it a company as a whole?
It'd be state by state. So if you have 3 people in New Hampshire, you wouldn't have to do it. And then, of course, every state could be a little different. But I would say, it would be state by state. So anything under 15 in New Hampshire would be a no.
Okay.
Yeah. Good one.
Let's see, how does the DOL violation process work? Is there an in-person investigator or is it online?
It's a good question. I think it depends a little bit on what the situation is. So you have unemployment hearings, where sometimes the employer is required to show up either in person or over the phone if there's a disagreement with the former employee. Sometimes in the event of a discrimination case, you might be required to go in person to meet with an investigator, or they may want to come on site, which is probably the the most least desirable thing you'd
Right.
ever want, because then they can start talking to other people
Right.
and nitpicking and looking into
Checking
things.
files.
Yeah. And so, and then there are some that are definitely back and forth. So I had one maybe a year ago, Department of Labor. It was really an audit. And they wanted to kind of check out, how many females and people of color that we had in a certain location. And we had definitely less than we would all like, but what we did is we had to show them all the efforts we took to prove that we really tried. So we talked about recruitment fairs that we did. We talked about where we advertised. We talked about special groups that we network with to try, to get a better representation, and that satisfied them.
Mhm.
So that was all online. So I guess it really could just vary based on what the situation is.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's it for now.
Yeah, right.
Does
So-
that answer your question, Tyler? Yes.
All right. Good, Tyler. So wait, there's more. I lied. I said there were 10, there's 11. So improper classification of independent contractors is a common violation, right? So yes, employers would love to get away with not paying, taxes, for their employees, right? So the Social Security tax, Medicare, it's over 7%, and such. So yeah, I'll just make you an independent contractor, right? Not necessarily. So the way New Hampshire works is that every employee is an employee unless they show themselves to be otherwise. There is usually a fairly large checklist. It depends on the state that can help you determine, is someone really an independent contractor, or are they an employee? So New Hampshire has like 12 criteria that are outlined on their Department of Labor website under this law here, NHRSA 281.A2. Normally they're looking at things like who's providing the equipment for the person to work? Where do they work out of? Are they just responsible for a finished product? Who has control? Control's a big one over how the work is done, when the work is done, the method in which the work is done, and such. So if the employer can prove that the person is doing work that they largely control, that they are essentially responsible for being there for a period of time to produce a certain product or outcome, it's likely they could be an independent contractor, and you wouldn't have to have them do the whole W-4, and you wouldn't have to worry about, W-2s at the end of the year, but they'd be a 1099 contractor.
Okay.
So yeah, this one definitely is a trap for a lot of employers, and this is something that we also work with people on. We have a very thorough checklist. I think ours is even 20 questions.
So a question in regards to that, would an independent contractor, if we had policies, so for example, my company, we do
Yeah.
promotional marketing. If I was to hire somebody to help with sales,
Mhm.
certainly they can, prospect however they're gonna prospect
Yeah.
and whatnot. But if we had a policy in place that said, margins can't be any less than, say, 30%
Mhm.
margin. We've set that policy for our pricing.
Mhm.
Do they, because of that, and we want them to follow that, do they then, because of that, become an employee?
No, you can set certain parameters, but you wouldn't be subjecting them to your employee handbook, for example. Like,
Okay.
hey, you gotta sign this, or hey, you can't take time off, or you have to wait 90 days to take time off like a regular employee. No.
Okay. But we could provide them with software tools that we use.
You could. and, you know, some basic rules of the road would be fine. Also, what's important is that the independent contractor is not working just for you. Usually, if they offer their services to the general employment public, that is in favor of them being an independent
Okay,
contractor, doing the same type of work.
so we couldn't limit them being a salesperson for, say, another promotional marketing company.
Correct. Yeah. Unless,
Because I mean,
If it were a
if I want them,
Yeah.
gaining clients, then I certainly don't want them for the competition.
yeah, exactly. They could work for, you know, somebody else, but yeah, it would probably be a conflict of interest if, you know, if they worked for the same or only the same, you know, types of people, then it would be, I think that would be tough.
Okay,
Now there could be ways around it in an agreement, independent contract,
okay,
that you could get around that. But yeah, I'd want to have either a lawyer or HR look at that to make sure it was good.
would that be like a non-disclosure agreement?
Yeah, there's definitely, that's totally fine. And also, but you know, just as far as, the only thing I'm not 100% sure of is, does the employer have the right to tell them you can't work for a competitor? I'll just take I'll make a simple example, a yoga studio.
Mhm.
Say I'm a yoga instructor and I'm not. But if I had like a particular brand of yoga that was mine, and I wanted to work with a variety of yoga studios here and there, that would probably fit as an independent contractor, and they wouldn't really have the right to tell me, well, you can't work for, you know, this one.
Right,
And so,
so it's dependent upon the position.
yeah, I think that's a great point. Depends on what the position is, the sensitivity maybe of the,
So we could hire a bookkeeper,
Right.
an outside bookkeeper, and
Yes.
obviously,
yes,
they can work with other.
Yeah.
clients, and they can be
Yes.
considered an independent contractor.
Right.
Or a vendor.
right. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, that one's a little tricky, for sure. Always case by case. So before I get into the benefits, I just wanted to do a quick check to see if there were any questions about any of these violations or any ones I didn't cover, perhaps, that you're thinking about.
I don't see anything yet.
All right, you can always come back to it. Let's talk a little bit about benefits. You know, some of the standard benefits that employers offer, healthcare, vision plans, dental plans, paid holidays, paid vacation. Some companies, what they do is they bucket time off, you know, you have vacation, sick, personal, all in one bucket called PTO, and such. But these are the big buckets, and certainly the most expensive ones. Health and dental, especially health, is the big one. These are usually considered standard benefits depending on, you know, how big the company is, can they afford them, and such. Then there are some things like supplemental insurance, such as life insurance, which could be, you know, 1 times your annual rate of pay or 3 times your annual rate of pay. In some cases, the company may not pay for it, but you may pay for it through a vendor or a broker that the company uses to supply these supplemental types of insurance programs. Accident insurance, you know, maybe there's something out there that an employer might provide that you would pay for, things like short-term disability, long-term disability, through payroll deductions, of course, that you've agreed to and such. Benefits are absolutely expensive. There's no doubt about it. I think the real thing to think about is, what are you trying to accomplish with your desire to provide benefits? Is it multifaceted? Is it both to attract and retain? Is it a certain need that your employees are telling you that they have? Is it just to remain competitive? Is it something that maybe you just want to do and think is the right thing to do? One benefit that is not too expensive is something called an employee assistance program, or an EAP. EAPs are generally a way for employees to get some counseling when they need it, and oftentimes it includes their dependents. An EAP company usually operates 24/7 and on a confidential basis. So if someone is having trouble either inside of work or outside of work that's impacting their mental health and well-being, they can speak to a licensed counselor. There might be a threshold of a certain number of sessions that are covered for free. And then after that, they might have to go, either out of pocket or through their network, which is hard to do these days. I've heard that, mental health is certainly becoming much more of a challenge in the workplace. Back in the old days, we just told people to leave their problems home. Not today. They bring it all. And workplaces these days are encouraging people to be their authentic selves at work, while getting their job done, of course. But there is research to show that, companies that offer these types of benefits demonstrate that they care for the employee, and that results in increased productivity, retention rates, and generally, more engaged and happier employees in general. If you don't have a specific program EAP, you could just check with your short-term disability provider or healthcare provider to see if they have anything. These are some companies that we've listed here: Modern Health, Spring Health, LifeWorks, Uliance. I know there's many, many more, but it's something worth considering. I'll just pause on this, see if there are any questions or comments. All right. Some things that are trending now in terms of best practices are, paid parental leave. So perhaps you have a child, you're the father of that child. I've seen companies offer 2 weeks of paid leave for that. Maternity paid leave as well once the child is born. Pledging 1%, BlueLion does this, so volunteering your time to an outside organization and getting compensated for it. So maybe it's a volunteer day or something. Thanks, appreciation. So not just saying thank you, but sometimes companies have these platforms that allow their coworkers or leaders to recognize an employee for doing something that went above and beyond. Whether there's any compensation attached to it, yes or no. Sometimes just being recognized is a great benefit. Tuition reimbursement is a fairly common supplemental benefit offered. If you're going to do this, just make sure that you set the eligibility requirements. How long do you have to work for the company? Does the tuition have to be related to the job or to the company somehow? What portion are you going to pay? Does the employee need to stick around for a period of time after getting the reimbursement, such as a year? And then are they subject to paying all of it or a portion of it back when they leave? Having no meeting days. I see this one kind of fail a lot. But I know I've worked for companies that are like, we're not going to have meetings on Fridays anymore. And then before you know it, yeah, we are. But if you can commit to it and it makes sense for your business and you think it would help, give it a try. And if it's working, try to keep it up. Bereavement leave, that also includes pregnancy loss, is a relatively newer type of benefit that some employers are offering. Workplace wellness programs, which could include maybe discounts, to gym memberships, or having something on site, or having a program that focuses on, wellness day of the month. Maybe the first one is dietary, the second one is mental health, the third one is, something having to do with a particular stress management or what have you. Flex scheduling, letting people flex their hours if it's possible based on the work that they do. Is it possible for people to work from home, depending on what they do? Some companies offer legal types of services through almost like an EAP, but on the legal side that can help with divorces or will preparation. Providing office snacks, pet insurance is a great supplemental benefit that employees, would pay for. And then other things that are listed here.
I think my company should offer me home cleaning.
Yes, that would be great, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would.
Yeah, I think most people would sign up for that one. Absolutely. Okay, those are some of the things that are now trending. Are there any anything in particular anyone wants to talk about around benefits?
On the paid parental leave.
Yes.
I know in Massachusetts, and I only know about this because my oldest daughter applied for it. They implemented a program that they could get, I think it was 12 weeks or more off, not
Yeah.
only the mother, but also the father.
Yes.
And get paid for it.
Okay.
And I thought I had read somewhere that New Hampshire was implementing something similar. Is that true? How would that work?
Right. That's a good one. Yeah, so I don't think it exists yet in New Hampshire, I should say. The federal law would still apply, which in some cases, the state law, they match it. So your job is woman having a child, eligible for those 12 weeks unpaid leave, job protection is really the key. So it's all about job protection. Anything kind of like income related, I think at the moment is more company policy. I know Mass does have a paid leave act. And I don't remember the threshold off the top of my head in terms of the number of employees, the maximum number of weeks. How does it work with maybe short-term disability? Pretty complicated sometimes. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't feel I can really answer your question definitively.
Tyler is wondering what is the most desired benefit that most companies you work with don't have? And what is the reasoning behind employers not providing it?
That's a good one. That is a real good one. I'm thinking, Tyler. I'm thinking, what do I hear out there? In some cases, it's health insurance, just because it's so expensive. I see a lot of clients that don't have tuition reimbursement plans. And that one, I think, would be one that people wish they could offer, and that employees wish their company offered that.
Is that also a cost?
Yes. So the employer would commit to paying a portion of the tuition. Now, it doesn't have to be a lot of money. It's really what the company can afford to pay, in which case, is it worth it, to implement it if it's really not.
Or if you can't follow through.
Yeah. Yeah. So. All right. Thank you, Tyler. Hiring and retention. So obviously the game has changed over the last couple of years with recruiting, right? Wages being not keeping up with inflation, people not wanting to do certain types of work anymore. It's been a real challenge out there. So what are some tips and tricks, for 2023 and beyond? So, building a strong recruiting program, who's in charge of hiring your folks? Are they talented in this area? Can they put together a recruitment strategy that includes things like, creative advertisements. Where should we be advertising? And what types of organizations should we be working with to get the talent we need, the diversity we need? What's our brand strategy? What's our commitment out there to our customers, to our employees, to the people or communities in which we serve? Making sure that that's out there and people know about it. Using an applicant tracking system is important because you can get people's information in there and know that even if they're not a fit for a certain job that they've applied for, maybe there's another position down the road that they'd be a good fit for, as well as just being able to track, by job requisition, who has applied, and how many of those are good applicants and such. Effective job posting, making sure that the posting includes everything about the job someone would want to know. What are the essential job functions? Things on there about accommodations. If they are needed, they can be requested so long as you can do the effective functions of the job. Don't make it boring, kind of jazz it up a little bit without falsifying anything, but talk a little bit about the company culture, for example, if that's something you're proud of, or something else that makes your company stand out, compared to others. Include that in the job posting. Beefing up benefits, easier said than done, right? Depending on your budget, and the costs associated with that. But if there is a particular benefit you offer that you're super proud of, list it in the job posting and showcase your culture, which I talked about. If you need a lot of people who are doing, sometimes the same thing, or maybe just a couple of different jobs, consider an open house. Certainly they went out the window when COVID came, but they're coming back now. So maybe either having people to the facility in a room with some food and drink and such could be a really nice thing to get people to come. Usually food is a good motivator. And then we talked a bit about enhancing your employer brand strategy and what makes you stand out. Why would I want to work for ABC company? How does that align with my values and what I'm looking for?
We are running up on the time. We got about 3 minutes left. So I just wanted to let you know that.
Thank you very much. A few other things, lean on your current employees, maybe have a referral bonus program. I've seen these work well. So maybe it's, $100, $300, whatever, depending on the job. Maybe the more hard to find the person is, the more the bonus should be. And, making the bonus conditional upon, hiring that person, but also having them stay for 90 days or so. Meet elite candidates where they are, meaning things like, if you can be flexible on your pay without creating too much trouble based on someone's experience, that would be good. If you have the flexibility to offer slightly different hours to that person based on their need without upsetting your internal world, sure. This one's big. Streamline your interview process. Please don't make people interview with like 7 different people, and don't take too long on decision making. That's when you lose people. The best people you'll lose. And then keep your candidates warm in the process. The ones that you really want, you should be updating them along the way and making sure they know what's going on so they don't look to leave you. All right, that concludes the presentation. I'm just going to follow just quickly a little bit about BlueLion. Our mission is to ensure the long-term success of our clients by using a realistic approach to HR while maintaining a healthy work-life balance. Our core purpose is authenticity, out-of-the-box thinking, meeting our clients and employees where they are. Things that we offer, we can be your HR department if you want us to, and be a completely outsourced HR solution. We do develop and deliver on training commitments, such as harassment, compensation, you name it. We do projects. We do things like employee handbooks, revisions, safety manuals, performance appraisal, design and such, HR audits to see, what your company's doing, where maybe some gaps could be in terms of best practices, harassment training, we have HR hotline. We can be monthly on site as well, be on site once a month to help you with any HR related needs. And of course, we have a monthly HR training and webinars, which you can look at on our website. We keep them in YouTube as well. We've got over 30 videos out there in terms of quick HR topics. We have an HR blog on HR topics as well, handbooks, leave of absence, COVID, payroll, benefits, safety policies, and more. So this is, I believe, the last slide. Benefits of outsourcing. Sometimes you might not have the expertise in-house. You get some time back to do other things that you might consider are more important and really why you're there. Knock out that to-do list without too much worry on the HR side. Confidence that you're being compliant, giving you more peace of mind and better business decision-making ability. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you for your time. Feel free to connect with us. Our contact information is here, phone number, website, and such. And we're on different social media platforms. And I'll just pause one final time to see if there are any final questions.
Tyler said you did a great job.
Thanks, Tyler. I appreciate that.
That's fantastic. And BlueLion is an amazing HR organization, and to tell Tony and Allison that we said hello.
I will. Thank you so much.
But
I
yes,
appreciate that.
definitely. Thank you so much for agreeing to present today. There was
You're welcome.
lots of great information that, like I said in the beginning, that every business can use. We appreciate that you came.
All right.
And to everybody out there, we're thankful that you joined us today. We encourage you to check out our website for future events, and you can check our social media channels on Facebook and LinkedIn as we update our events there as well. And with that, I will end the recording.
All right. Thank you very much.
And we will go from there.